I'm Gina. Welcome to Highline Heritage Museum for 7 Stories. Got a great lineup tonight and a full crowd here. And every time we have a gathering, we take a moment to recognize that we are on native land. Please think in honor of those who have preceded us, including the people of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Nisqually, and Muckleshoot tribes. And thank you for coming here tonight. We're happy that the museum can host this event. It's been growing. We started out in the conference room, and now we're in here with twice as many people, so that's wonderful. Your MC tonight will be Fred. Fred, you ready to take it away? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gina. And if this is your first time at the museum, please enjoy it. This is an incredible treasure in our community, and they have memberships, and so you can find out more about it. But it's really an amazing resource for us, and they have so many different pieces of the Highline story and the Highline history. So please come back, not just for 7 Stories, you should come back for that, but also just to come to the museum, because it's a cool place to come and bring your friends and family. So big thanks to the Highline Heritage Museum and the City of Burien for their support of 7 Stories, also the Burien Arts Association and Burien Culture Hub, and of course the B-Town blog that is here tonight. They are live streaming this event, and then you can check it out later if you don't catch the live stream and watch it again over and over and over, which you'll want to do and relive this experience. So also follow us on Meetup if you're on Meetup, or if you have an interest in getting on Meetup. It's meetup.com, and then you can search for 7 Stories, and then it'll send you a reminder about what's happening, and you can feel like you're meeting up. Or you can go to burienculturehub.com/7 Stories, where you can also find out and sign up to tell a story. So we have 7 incredible storytellers tonight. Some of them you've seen before, some of them you haven't. One of them just about 5 minutes ago said he would tell a story because we had a last minute change. And so that's gonna be amazing. We're always excited. I wanna point out Peggy, who's going to send around a clipboard if you wanna sign up for an upcoming storytelling workshop, or you just wanna get on our mailing list. So that's coming around. Please feel free to sign up. And Peggy also has a donation jug, hat, something. And so
We need to keep our organization, which is all volunteer, running smoothly for all of you. So please make a generous donation into the basket, conveniently located. You have to walk by it.
Yes, it's right over here. So feel free at any point, but hopefully not during a storyteller. Want to point out, in case this is your first storytelling event, or maybe it's not, and I'll just say it anyway, storytellers love to get feedback from the audience. They love to feel like people are listening and excited, so please smile at people. If you want to snap your fingers, or they say something that you're really excited about, you can certainly say, right on, or whatever you want to is totally fine. This is not one of those environments where you have to be super quiet. Preferably don't speak so loud that we can't hear the story, but definitely give feedback to people and clap for them. This is a big deal for folks to tell a little story about who they are or an experience they've had, and it's really great to feel like the audience is going with you and excited for you and excited about you. And so our first storyteller that we're all going to be welcoming and excited about is Polite Kitty, who is a sarcastic, witty person telling about their lives as an autistic, disabled super parent. They are a therapist by day and performer by night. Growing up with only part of a dad, they write, left me feeling like only part of a daughter. So, Polite Kitty.
So everyone just knows I'm also a comedian, so if I feel like I'm going to pull this away, I apologize. My instinct is to move around on the stage and be, animated. This is a new story for me, so bear with me as I work through some of the kinks on this. It took me literally 30 days to write this story. I talked to Sybil about it, and I was like, yeah, I'll sign up, and I thought, oh, this was a bad idea. You see, I have a very distinct core memory about my father. And it is a happy one. I don't want to start off like on a bad foot here. It is happy. He used to work at Sears. I think that's probably the oldest sentence I've said in a while. He did. He worked at Sears. He was a mechanic. Back in the day when Sears actually had a car shop. And he used to work late hours, and so it was like swing shift. So he would come home, and at this time it was 1985. And I was living in a really small trailer over in Tukwila with my mom and my dad when they were still together. And I can remember him coming home, and my favorite thing to do was eat cereal with him. He would come, it would be like midnight. And now remember, this is 1985. Yes, I am 43, and despite what this looks like. I heard the laughter. I don't want that much laughter. But I was like 3 or 4, and I can remember him coming home, and his favorite cereal, Golden Crisps. Again, a very old sentence for me to say. Do you guys remember Honey Smacks? Yeah. Also his favorite. Mine was Cinnamon Toast Crunch, if anybody is interested. Yeah, thank you. You need a whole box of that and throw up. So he'd come home, and I can still remember hearing the snapping and the crackle of that Golden Crisp, right? When the milk would hit it. And we'd trot out into the living room. And my mom let me do this. Again, I'm about 3 or 4. And we would go out into the living room and watch TV together at midnight, eating cereal. In my 4-year-old brain, this is the most exciting time of my life. I get to stay up with my dad. We would watch TV shows like The Monkees. Oh, I just woke up some crowd. The Monkees, it was a great show. They were a great band. He'd also let me watch movies like Evil Dead, which is also a great movie. Funny, I see some people going, I don't know. But it's where my love of horror first started. And I can remember even before he got there, running up to the door to look for him outside. We had this long driveway, and I could hear his Volkswagen pulling up. Because back in the 80s, German cars were like the thing, right? Like, we had a Karmann Ghia, we had a Volkswagen Bug, because we loved it. And it's a very distinct sound, right, when you're listening to those German cars and they come up the driveway. My dad, being a mechanic, taught me a lot about cars. It wouldn't probably surprise you that we also had a VW bus. I'm unlocking a lot of core memories for a lot of people tonight. And in our VW bus, we would go camping. Yeah, he would grab his guitar, and he would sit in the back of this van. Again, my best memory is sitting in the back of this van, eating cereal with him. This is what we did. We ate cereal. It's what we could afford. He played guitar. He would sing. I'm pretty sure he smoked pot. He was a big old hippie. So was my mom. And as I tell this story, you can see on my face, I am smiling. I feel happy in this moment. But that starts to fade when I come crashing back down to reality. Because my reality is that my biological father was never in my life, really. That was the last good memory I have of my father. 1985. right before my parents divorced. I'm not saying she shouldn't have divorced him. She absolutely should have. There's a reason why he was coming home so late at night. It's not because he was at the mechanic shop. I think Sears closed at like 6 or something, as far as that department went. No, he was out being the 19-year-old that he was. You heard that, 19. My mom was the same age. And it's really hard when you're raising a child when you're so young. The 80s brought a lot of things. And for my father, it was also struggles, which he got caught up in with drugs and alcohol. His favorite, crack. I mean, let's just end the stigma of that name right there, crack. Crack cocaine, that's what he liked. It didn't make him a bad person. It made him a person who made terrible decisions. But he was still my father. I did end up going no contact with my dad. And I have a wonderful father figure in my life right now. No, he's not a big cereal eater. He's a big Reese's eater, and I'm just all for that as well. I'm okay with that. But my dad taught me something, which was the cereal therapy technique. It is true. I actually made this up and use it in my everyday practice. Because what you don't know about me is not only am I a therapist, I'm a therapist to autistic children. And sometimes they don't want to talk back. Sometimes they're in their own world, right? And so I sit with them, and we watch TV, and we choose to be happy together. So yeah, I do what my dad did for me, but I do it for other people now who are struggling. I would just like to say that while my dad chose drugs, because it's an option. It really, I mean, as much as, you try to stay away from it and there is a genetic component, it is always a choice, right? But for me and my healing and my years of therapy that I had to go through, I choose the cereal. Thank you.
Sometimes just sitting with someone is all they need. So that's lovely. Thank you. I had a 73 Super Beetle, and so I had, good VW memories. But enough about me. We have another storyteller coming, a local legend, Paul Currington. As you can tell, well received even before he's on stage. So Paul hosts Fresh Ground Stories, Washington's longest running storytelling open mic, and his story tonight is about his dad's funeral.
Well, I've never been introduced as a local legend. Only in Burien am I getting that. Me and D.B. Cooper. Man. And I was disappointed to hear no Captain Crunch. Come on, the captain, not? All right, you're an enlisted person, okay. All right. About a week after my dad died, his wife Betty called me. It was time to go to the memorial, the celebration of life, up in Mount Vernon. And at first, I didn't want to go, partly because I wasn't ready to say goodbye, but also partly that I was always so different from my dad and Betty. We loved each other, but I just felt I made them really uncomfortable just with my presence. Like, my dad and I were complete opposites. For one thing, my dad never spoke, never talked. I do this. He never said a word, almost ever. The only advice my dad ever gave me, one day he said, "Son, don't ever get hemorrhoids." But you know me, always the rebel. Now, Betty was also very quiet, but also obsessively neat. Also the opposite of me. That house did not have a speck of dust in it. When I would go sit in the living room with a cup of coffee, whenever I would get up to go to the kitchen, Betty would run over to my chair, put a coaster under the cup, then run back as though nothing happened. One time, Betty made a bed while I was still in it. Because nobody sleeps in past 7 at Dad and Betty's house. But I knew I was going to go up because it was going to be the last time I ever got to know my dad. See, my parents divorced when I was very young, and for about 20 years, I didn't really see him very much. So I didn't really know who he was. And then in the last few years, we got back together, and we were just starting to get to know each other when he died. So this is going to be my last chance to go up and see all these friends of his and figure out who this man was. So I drive up to Mount Vernon, 2-hour drive. I walk in the house, and it is completely quiet. It's filled with all kinds of people, 30, 40 people, all 70, 80 years old, all my dad. Nobody is saying a word. It's so quiet, I can hear the Mr. Coffee gurgling in the kitchen. It's as though, you know those old photographs in the 1850s where nobody's smiling? I felt like I just walked into one of those pictures. If someone had been wearing a bonnet and holding a musket, it would have been a Civil War photo. And I'm immediately nervous, like this cannot happen. I need to find out of my dad. I've never been to a celebration of life where everyone was dead. Okay? So I start working the room. I'm talking to people. I'm schmoozing. Nothing. They're just sitting with their teacups. They don't even know why I'm talking to them. So finally, I sit down next to Betty, and I go, Betty, do you know any stories about Dad that I don't know? And she said, well, did he ever tell you about the time a moose chased him up a tree? I said, no, he never told me about that. What was he doing to that moose that it chased him up a tree? She said, well, I don't know. I never thought to ask. Now I'm about to lose my mind. I cannot stay in this room anymore. So I leave the room. I go down the hall to the den, my dad's favorite room. Because he grew up in the Depression, the Great Depression, not the chronic depression like me. He grew up in the Depression, and they had no money. And for most of his life, he had no money. Then later in life, he got a good job, and he was able to pay bills. And man, did he love to pay bills. Weirdest thing, but he just loved to do it. So I go down into the den, and I sit at his desk, and I'm just trying to touch the things that I'm just trying to feel him, you know? Like I got one of his old t-shirts on under my button-down shirt, and I'm just trying to get a sense of my old man. And I open this drawer down here, and I see all this paper, and I know immediately what it is. I can tell. It's all these financial newsletters that you used to get, like from Lehman Brothers and Goldman Sachs. When I was a little kid, he had no idea what to do with kids. He was so uncomfortable around children. He would sit me on his lap and read me his investment newsletters, word for word. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's all he could think to do. And now I'm looking at these things, and I'm getting choked up because these are my bedtime stories. And so then I open the middle drawer, and there's all these stuff in there, these gadgets, and I find this one thing. You know those things that are cigarette lighters, but they're shaped like something else. I'm looking at this thing, and I'm playing with it, and all of a sudden it explodes, like in my face. And I don't know what I did, but I'm just stunned for a second. Then I realize, oh no, this is not a cigarette lighter. This is mace. Yes, I've just maced myself. I've never been maced. It's really good. It's exactly what you think it is. It's very effective. It's so incredibly painful. And now I'm stuck in this room that's filled with mace. I can't even breathe. So I run out of the den, down the hallway, into the living room where all these, and I just run into a corner. And I want to scream, but I don't, because that would be an emotion and make everyone very uncomfortable. So I'm just standing in the corner, just trying to blink this stuff out of my eyes, and I'm hoping no one comes up to me and talk, because I can't utter a word. I'm still got all this mace in my body, and suddenly I hear someone behind me kind of clearing their throat, and then I hear someone on the other side of me kind of cough, and I look around, and I realize, I guess there was a shift in the airflow in the house. All that mace had floated into the living room. And as I turn around to see what is going on, people start coughing even louder. Then they start hacking, and now they're openly weeping, crying on each other's shoulders, but they have no idea they've been maced. And they think they're grieving harder than they've ever grieved before in their lives. They can't believe they miss my dad this much. And after like 2 minutes, they start talking to each other. And they start laughing at they start telling stories about my dad and all the silly things he used to say. And I gotta tell you, I have never been so close to my family. It's in that moment, I'm just like, wow, this is wonderful. And I realized in that moment why it was always so hard to get to know my dad. Because they never told any stories. And telling stories is how we get to know each other. It's how we share our lives with other people. When I was a kid, after my parents got divorced, I didn't have a lot of friends. And I spent a lot of time alone, feeling like this one solitary star looking for a constellation to belong to. And then when I got older, and I started telling stories, and I started meeting other people who told stories, I felt like I had finally found my constellation. And it breaks my heart to know that my dad never found his constellation. But I know for that one moment, in that living room in Mount Vernon, Washington, he was part of mine.
See what I said? Local legend, right? Thank you, Paul. I have made an outfit change. I was recently at a Mariah Carey concert in Las Vegas, and she made lots of outfit changes, so I thought I would follow suit. I cannot hit those whistle notes like her, but I think this is probably it. I don't think I'm going to go any more, but we'll see how that. Thank you. We'll see how the evening continues, and if Mace comes in, then maybe we'll all get crazy. I don't know. Our next speaker is one of a brother-sister pair who are here tonight. And so Kate McPhail is the middle child of 5. Although they were in different states for many years, the siblings have drifted back to Washington in recent years. This story is an example of one of the clashes I had with my older sister. She tells us we were very different personalities and looked at life from diverse perspectives. So Kate, come on up.
That was a hard act to follow, by the way, Paul. So like I was introduced, I am one of 5 siblings, so I think I'm probably pretty close to an expert on sibling rivalry. So I was thinking about this topic, I was thinking, some of the reasons that there was rivalry in our family was because of birth order, because birth order does play a part. So my sister was the oldest in the family, and like most older children, she was, she's here tonight, so I don't want to say bossy. I'm not going to say bossy, but I will say managerial. And she was very good at telling us what the rules were and how we were supposed to follow them and what we were supposed to do and how we were supposed to do it. So a couple years after she was born, my brother Tom was born, and he was a lot different than Karen. He didn't really follow the rules, especially the rules that Karen set. And then I came along. I'm 5 years younger than Karen, and I'm very different from Karen because I don't think rules really apply to me. And I pretty much march to my own band. In fact, a lot of times I'm marching to my own band rather than marching to the band that Karen wanted me to march to. And then we had a younger brother 5.5 years later. Bill came along, and then Bob was the tail end of the family. But this story is about Karen and I was 9, so Bill was 4, and Karen was 14, so Tom would have been 12. And Mom and Dad every Saturday would go grocery shopping, and with a house full of kids, it took them some time. So they would leave Karen in charge. So Karen's idea of being in charge was different than mine. My idea was, okay, there's somebody bigger here, so if somebody breaks in, she can take care of that. That was my idea of Karen being in charge. Her idea was a little different. So Mom and Dad left this day. Tom usually would disappear up to his room. He'd build a model or do some kind of project, anything to kind of stay away from Karen's in-chargeness. And Bill would want me to play with him. Well, he was a little annoying brother, so I didn't always want to play with him. Sometimes I would, but most of the time he annoyed me. I just picked on him. And this time I was reading a Nancy Drew book, which was very important because I had to solve this mystery. I always tried to solve the mystery before Nancy Drew did. Sometimes I actually succeeded. And Bill was off playing something, I don't know, probably building with blocks or playing with cars. And Karen came up with an idea. Now, Karen was very good at coming up with schemes. She was really good at that. They usually involved us other kids doing things and her telling us how and when to do them. And so this time she came up with this really great plan in her head that if we cleaned the whole house and had it all spotless when Mom and Dad got home, that they would take us and we could go to the zoo, because we loved going to the zoo, to visit the Tacoma Zoo. And she was sure that this was going to work, but it involved making sure the house was all cleaned up first. So of course, everybody has to help clean the house. So she got the vacuum cleaner, put it in the middle of the living room floor, and instructed me to vacuum the living room floor. I was reading a book, and I kept reading my book. Bill got excited about this idea because he loved to go to the zoo, so he put all his toys away, and she gave him an old washcloth to dust with, so he very diligently dusted everything he could find. Well, Karen went in the kitchen and did something in the kitchen. I was reading a book. I have no idea what she was doing in the kitchen. And now and then from the kitchen, I would hear her say, "Kate, get up and start vacuuming. We have to be done before Mom and Dad get home." And I would ignore her, as usual, and turn the page and continue reading. This book was really good. It was Nancy Drew, and some kind of mystery was happening, and her dad was involved, and pretty soon they were kind of in the same mystery, and who was going to solve it first, and it was a good book. So I kept reading. Karen kept yelling, and she was getting a little more excited as the time went on. So she came in, finally she got done with the kitchen, came in and finished the dining room while she's still telling me to vacuum, which was the only job she gave me. Of course, I wasn't doing it. So finally she got pretty much in my face and said, "Get up and vacuum. If the house isn't clean, Mom and Dad won't take us to the zoo." I ignored her, turned the page, and said, and I wasn't being snotty, I was being very matter of fact, I said, "If Mom and Dad take us to the zoo, they're not going to leave me home by myself." I was 9. So I can't actually remember, when I was thinking of this story, I can't remember if we actually did go to the zoo that day. But I do know one thing, I won that round.
Thank you, Kate. I have one of those bossy older sisters too. That's not fun. Everyone having a good time? All right, we're 3 stories in. We got 4 more to go. Keeps getting better and better. Sam Lamb is up next. Sam has been a real estate agent for 23 years and finally moved to Burien in 2020 after many years of telling clients how great it is. Sam's story is about... Sam's story... Where are you, Sam? It's about... Come on up. Sam's story is about finding their father at age 49.
Okay, my only goal tonight is to be more coherent than our presidential candidates from last night. So let me know if I do all right. So if you asked my friends and family about me, the thing that they would probably tell you, if you asked one thing they could say about me, it would be that I actually collect awesome people. I'm really good at it. I have amazing friends, and I have what I call a huge chosen family. Now that came out of necessity. When I turned 22, I lost my mom very suddenly, and she was the only parent that was in my life. When she was pregnant with me, she left my father because she said that he had come home from Vietnam and had been addicted to drugs and alcohol and had just come back a different person and was getting into lots of trouble. And as soon as she found out she was pregnant, she decided that it would be better to do it alone. So she moved on, was a single mom for a while, became I got a step parent along the way, had a great, very good childhood. But when my mom died, and my mom happened to have been adopted, she was adopted, so I didn't have any blood relatives when she passed away. And I found myself at 22 completely alone in the world. I had friends, I had some I was kind of new in the, you're getting your friends out of high school, going to college. And as I was going, I was realizing that some of the familiar relationships that had been around were not that healthy. And so as I went through my 20s, I let go of some of those relationships. I moved into my 30s, and I met my amazing husband. He actually had, thanks, honey. He had 2 children that were 2 and 3, and I have the most amazing stepkids. I consider them my own. I married into an incredible family. I got really lucky. I love my in-laws. And I went through life. I'm very happy. I have a very successful business, and I enjoy life. Well, when I was about to turn the age that my mom was when she passed away, I suddenly got very interested in my genealogy. I'd never been interested in my father before. He seemed kind of like a deadbeat. The only things I knew about him were that he was an addict, and he wasn't around, and that he was Irish. His parents were apparently right off the boat from Ireland, and I was kind of excited to know that I was half Irish. So I did my genealogy and got it back from 23andMe, and it came back that I was 68% Norwegian Swedish and no Irish. And at age 46, just about to be 47, I went on a quest. And it was not to smear my mother's good name, although I did do that in the process. But it was to find out who my father was. And I asked my stepdad, and I asked her friends, and I asked her workmates, and nobody seemed to know who it could be. It was the 70s, one person said. Not heartening. So the trail went dead after a couple of years, and then all of a sudden I got a lead. A new cousin, a full cousin, somebody who shared my father. So I called him up, and he said, interesting, my mom has 3 brothers, but I know all their kids. Who are you? And that led me to find my father, Gary Johnson, living in Minneapolis. And as it turned out, Gary Johnson had no idea I existed. He had had a very 3-month dating relationship with my mom as she was leaving her marriage. And he had been transferred to another state and had never known that I was his child. My mom, in the meantime, had actually gotten back together with her husband after he left and got pregnant and thought that I was his daughter, and she, left and moved on. Well, he was very surprised to find me, but he was a very good and kind man, came out to visit Seattle, which was great. And then I found out that I had a half-sister, and she came out to Seattle, and she was awesome. That was great. And we've been getting to know each other. We've been sharing music. We've been texting. We've been sharing Marco Polos, which is a video app for staying in touch. And then I went to go visit her last year after getting to know her for about 1.5 years. And when I got there, it was my second visit with her in person. And I got there, and I was there for 4 days, and we had some nice times, but I found out that she was a chronic complainer. She was very negative. She had a lot to say about her life, how it wasn't fair, how she didn't have enough money, how things had not worked out the way she had planned, which was hard because I wanted to help. And when I got back, I left her a message on Marco Polo, our little video messaging app, and I said, hey, I know you've been struggling a lot, and I just want you to know that if you want to go to therapy, I'd be so happy to help you pay for it. I can help. And she got really mad at me in a way that I haven't had someone get mad at me ever, maybe. And she was very venomous, and she said a lot of really hurtful things, and it was really surprising. Because after choosing my family for a long time, I'd chosen really positive, loving, kind people, and they really weren't, venomous or angry most of the time. And so it was kind of shocking, and I sort of felt like, ooh, I don't know what to do here. And we smoothed it over. I apologized profusely. I really didn't intend to offend her. And we continued to stay in touch, but it was different. We weren't as, she wasn't sharing as much. It was like we were walking on eggshells. And then I said to her, I'm really feeling so sad because I know I really messed up and I hurt you, and now I'm worried that we're never gonna have the relationship that I was hoping we could have. And she said something that was a little bit shocking to me, which was, I'm your sister. You're stuck with me. That's what families do. And it really surprised me because I don't feel like I've ever been stuck with anyone. And I really questioned it. I thought, well, am I? Am I stuck with this person? Like, do I have to choose this? And I realized that I wanted to. For now, I wanted to choose it. And it feels good to kind of come back to that and go, there's this link between us, and I could always not choose that relationship. There's always a possibility. But for now, I choose something new and something a little bit confusing and different for me, and it feels good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Boy, those relationships that we have that we don't choose, but then we realize, oh, maybe I wouldn't choose this. It's interesting. Not thinking of any particular relative of my own, but anyway. Up next, we have Josh Gertsman, who is a longtime resident of South King County. He works on the leadership team at Highline College and is a volunteer with King County Search and Rescue. Josh started telling stories to honor a friend he lost during the pandemic. Dad had a closet full of shoes and cowboy boots and a drawer full of mismatched socks, he tells us. One of my chores was to make pears, but there was always more to this chore than he originally thought. So Josh.
Maybe that's good. The most important job of an MC is to get the mic at the right height, so thank you, Fred. It's great to be with you tonight. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of celebrating my 54th birthday, and when we circled the calendar and said, what do you want to do special for that week? I saw that it was going to be a 7 stories week, and I said, this is what I want to do, so glad to be here. So when I was young, my mom would try to get us to do chores by providing us these little plastic tokens. The ones that I remember were rectangular, red, kind of just fit in the palm of your hand. I used to hold on my hand like it was a member of the Logan's Run cast, if anybody remembers that. And if you collected enough, thank you. If you collected enough tokens, you got to go to McDonald's or Dairy Queen, or maybe in my case, go to Woolworths to get a Hot Wheels car. Now, I was the youngest of 3. I have 2 older sisters. We lived in a comfortable house in a city, Natick, Massachusetts. It's just west of Boston. It was a 4-bedroom house. My parents had the primary bedroom. There was an ensuite bathroom that was my mom's bathroom. It had all sorts of things in there, like Gina Tay and L'Oreal, and my dad didn't go in that bathroom. And there was a hall bathroom that was a kid's bathroom. And then downstairs, a lot of the houses on our street had a big room that was a laundry room with a toilet and a sink. But I see some recognition there for that 70s style. But in our case, it was divided, so there was a small bathroom that was my dad's bathroom. It was with red carpet and red walls. And then the laundry room was next door, and it was always full of clothes, and it was like a galley, a very small galley. In fact, that scene from Star Wars where Han Solo, Luke, Leia, and Chewbacca are trapped in the trash compactor, and it starts closing in on them, that's how I felt every time I went in there, and I was one step away from a snake dragging me underground. But there was a lot of chores in this house. Now, going back upstairs, even though it was my mom's bathroom, the closet for it was my dad. And his suits were hanging in the closet, his shoes were on the ground, and his armoire was next between the bed and the closet. We'll get to that in a moment. Because in my bedroom, the closet, a young boy doesn't need to hang any clothes, so all my mom's clothes hung in my closet. And for some reason, they kept the vacuum cleaner in the corner behind my door, which was a mistake one time when I allowed the vacuum cleaner to fall against the door and as I walked out, and then therefore locked my door, and the only way we could get back in was to jam the door and have the stem of the vacuum come through the door and create a big hole, and that's a whole nother story too. But back to the chores, my mom was realizing that those tokens weren't doing what they're as good as they're good, and my dad, who was somewhat of a gambler, and so always had poker chips in the house, and here's one of them in my hand. She started doling out poker chips, and of different values, so you could gain and earn at different values. And one of my chores was to go into my parents' bedroom, not when they were there, but on my own. I was supposed to pair my dad's shoes. I thought probably 30 to 36 pairs of shoes. And then, yeah, he was a shoe hound. I do take after him a little bit. And then in this armoire, the first drawer was full of socks, probably 100 pairs of socks, all black and brown, different shades, different lengths, none of them paired. And then 3 pairs of white athletic shop with a green and yellow stripes on the top to go with his 1 pair of K-Swiss tennis shoes. Remember that, guys? Men used to have 1 pair of tennis shoes. My dad probably only played tennis twice a year, so that was fine. I'll get back to the socks in a second. The shoes, they were perfect for a young kid to kind of, dip my feet in, try them on. We lived in Massachusetts. My dad's from Buffalo, New York. But he spent a whole 6 months stationed in Germany was another story, in Colorado in the 50s in the Army. And so he fell in love with cowboy boots and cowboy hats. And there's a store in Denver called Shepler's, and he bought stuff there whenever he could. So he had about 6 pairs of cowboy boots. Those always went in the back right corner by length and color. This was the 70s, so he had about 4 pairs of black leather boots zipped up on the ankle, just like Starsky and Hutch used to wear. He had 1 pair of brown boots like that. He had 3 pairs of black tie shoes, 1 pair of brown wingtips, a brown pair of loafers with a gold tassel, and like 6 or 7 pairs of slippers that I think we got him every year for Father's Day. So I thought logically, if Dad's at the closet and he's getting dressed, he's gonna put the pants on and he can slip on a pair of shoes, so all the shoes should be pointed with the toes towards the back of the closet. Josh's logic didn't work, so I got scolded, and the next time all the shoes had to be paired and pointed outward. Okay, Dad's choice. Now, Dad, he was a good guy. I've inherited a lot from him, I've learned a lot from him, but I've also learned things that I don't necessarily want to do. But every morning he'd wake up and he'd start getting dressed and ready to go, and you'd hear a string of obscenities, and those obscenities would lead to the question, why can't I find a pair of socks? So in addition to the shoes, I was now tasked with pairing up those socks, and I'd have to stick my hand and see the lengths and this and that, and then those socks ended up on my head and various other body parts, that a 5 or 6 year old boy might stick them on. I spent a lot of time in that sock drawer, but I didn't pair as many socks as I was supposed to, because from the sock drawer, the next drawer was full of boxer shorts. I didn't really try those on, don't worry. I also didn't try on my mom's dresses that were hanging in my closet, you can tell. But the next drawers up were handkerchiefs, and I stayed away from those. But the top 2 shelves of his armoire were his personal effects. There were, my dad was a smoker, so there was usually 3 or 4 packs of Campbell's and Camel cigarettes. There was matches, pipes, pipe tobacco, and a couple lighters. I thought about a lighter earlier tonight. Fortunately, I did not ever blow up a lighter in that bedroom. Again, the setting of the house on fire, that's another story. The top shelf was where it really got interesting. My dad was an audiologist, so he had all these tools to test your hearing. He had tuning forks, and he had a magnifying glass, which I don't think tested your hearing, but it could tell if you had a pea in your ear. He had tweezers and a little buck knife and just all sorts of fun things that I enjoyed, kind of playing and messing around with. And then there was the bowl of coins. My dad always had a big bowl of coins, and then I told you he liked to gamble. He liked to go to the track, and he played in a weekly poker game. So there was another bowl that had his betting slips, and then if it was a good week, there was cash in there. If it was a really good week, when you woke up in the morning, there'd be a $5 bill or a $20 bill next to your pillow when you woke up in the morning. So that's when you knew things were going really well. So anyway, I spent a lot of time kind of messing around with those things. Well, when I went off to school in Michigan for college, my parents moved to Long Island. From Long Island, they moved out here because my sister had moved out here too, and they were living in a condo in Kirkland. So I finished a master's degree at Wayne State in Detroit, and I moved out here as well. I wanted to be able to spend some time with my family. I was living with them in this 2-bedroom townhouse because they hadn't bought a house yet either. They hadn't been able to fully retire on their retirement plans yet. So my dad was periodically taking some of these collectible things, and one of those things he collected were rare coins and precious metals, and he would cash those in so that they'd have some cash to live on. Well, one day I heard him kind of swearing up a storm and stomping around, but I had just seen him 5 minutes earlier, so I knew he was fully dressed, so he wasn't looking for socks. So I said, "Dad, what are you looking for?" And he's like, "I need to sell some gold. We need some money." And so just kind of in the back of my head, an idea clicked. I went in, found that armoire, which he still had, pulled the sock drawer open, slipped my hand into the far right corner, felt for the heaviest sock, pulled it out, and I said, "Are you looking for these?" Dad looked at me somewhat bewildered and said, "How did you know that's where I had my gold coins?" I said, "I don't know, maybe those chores many years ago, you had something else in mind for me to know." So the story doesn't end there. And the parents ended up buying a house in Kirkland, and Dad and I had several great years, getting to do cool stuff like playing in a community band with them. We were both tuba players. Well, in 2008, my dad was in a pretty bad car accident. He actually crashed his car into the side of a parked Metro bus. It was tragic, but he was able to survive in the hospital long enough for us to say goodbye. And after we said goodbye, and my mom was ready to start going through his things, she decided she'd start, boxing things up and getting rid of them. And I said, "Mom, hold on." And by this time in the new house, the socks had graduated to the top drawer. And I pulled the drawer open, I stuck my hand inside, and pulled out not one, not two, but somewhere between 24 and 30 rolled up $100 bills that were in those socks. Now it's my mom's turn to look bewildered and say, "How did you know those were there?" I said, "Remember those chores that you had me do? And those tokens you had me earn? Well, I may not have earned as many tokens, but I was looking around pretty good." So just to kind of close the loop on it, I'm here tonight because my dad was also a storyteller. The other thing is I'm here tonight because I get to work locally in our community. I'm not a gambler like my dad. I'm not a believer in trying to get rich quick. We've built it over time, and our life is rich because we get to spend it with community members and with family. And my son came here tonight. First time he's hearing me tell a story with his girlfriend, Lindy, so thanks for being there, my wife, Heather. One of the coins that I found in that I carry around, actually it's a $50. This one has the Gertsman name on it. My dad had coins minted with our family name, and it was one of those things that I used to have around with me, and I still carry it around with me just to remind me who I am and a little bit more about our roots.
Thank you, Josh. Little known fact, Josh runs the Highline College Foundation. I run the Highline Public Schools Foundation, and so oftentimes I receive checks for him, and he receives checks for me. And so it's important that we know each other and that I'm nice to him so that he gives me the checks. Say again? The $2 million check that you recently received. Yeah, the $2 million check was actually for us. But anyway, thank you, Josh. I also love that the pop culture references, because when you mentioned Starsky and Hutch, like my head just went to so many places of watching that show, and I just love that. So thank you so much. I mentioned that we have a sister-brother pair tonight. We're going to bring the brother up now and see if we can learn about other family members. So Bob McPhail, come on up and tell us about your experience with your siblings.
So I didn't figure in Kate's story because in thinking about it, I was probably shopping with my mom and dad because my mom might have been a couple months pregnant. And so this is going to be a slightly later story. Like the last storyteller, it involves both siblings and my dad was also a storyteller. So with your siblings or brothers, sibling rivalry can be kind of risky because there's always that sort of imminent threat of physical violence. But I was pretty lucky. I'm 5 years younger than my brother. I'm the baby in the family, and that worked out well. because I was smart enough to know that if I tortured him, he was going to basically kick my ass. And he was smart enough to know that if he kicked my ass, even if I was torturing him, he was going to be in big trouble with my mom and dad. And so we had a very peaceful coexistence. And besides, we're 5 years apart. All through our growing up, we were into totally different things. And our family was fairly poor. We had a roof over our head. We had food to eat. We were cared for. But my parents sometimes had to make an effort at that. And my father liked to find ways to economize. So a mantra in our house was, I don't own the electric company, as he flipped off light switches and turned the heat down. And you talked about cereal. My mom made amazing granola. But he decided to economize even more. If you bought those big bags of the cardboard flavored rice puffs, you could stretch out the cereal. That one didn't work because we just learned to pick the rice puffs out. The granola was great. But my dad's nemesis was the phone company. Now, almost everybody in here is of a certain age. So you know when I say the phone company, I mean the phone company. Because we didn't have Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint as options. The options you had from the phone company were Office or Princess. You could pick the color of that phone, and you could decide how long the cord was between the phone and the wall. But you were pretty much at the mercy of Ma Bell for the bill, which was quite expensive. Which brings me to my story. I was about 10. I was interested in baseball and reading stories, and I collected stamps, and I love stamps. And I can still tell you about all these obscure countries that you've probably never heard of because I had stamps from them, and I had a stamp book that told me a little bit about each country. My brother was 5 years older, so he was interested in girls, and he was saving money for a car, and by that time, he had a job. And one summer, his job, we had some family friends, and he got hired. He took care of their lawn, he did chores for them, and then they were painting their gigantic house. But I'm not sure they got their money's worth out of that deal, because that summer, their niece from San Diego came to visit Tacoma. And I think he spent most of his time flirting with Judy. Whatever happened, by the end of the summer, they were in love. So much so that they informed both sets of parents that they were engaged and hoped to get married as soon as they graduated from high school. At least they were going to wait that long. Well, that predictably didn't go over very well. But by this time, my oldest sister was 25. My parents were pretty experienced, and so were Judy's, and there was no ultimatums or yelling or screaming. Basically what happened was, well, Judy, you have to come back and go back to school in San Diego. And I think the parents' theory was you take a bunch of kind of hot and bothered teenagers and put them 1,000 miles apart, and things will cool off. But they gave it a very good try. And my brother had a school job by that time, and he made a deal with my dad that he could make long-distance calls because we never made long-distance calls. They were pre-planned, they were short as possible, and they were usually only in emergencies or on somebody's birthday. But Bill got dispensation if he paid his portion of the phone bill to call Judy once in a while. And that worked for a while. And this is back when phones had cords, and I still remember I think his calls were usually late at night, probably so that annoying little brothers weren't around, and you dragged the phone, we had the long cord, into your room so you could talk privately. Well, apparently one night, he and his girlfriend fell asleep on the line. He wakes up the next morning, hangs up the phone, goes about his life, and everything was fine until about 2 weeks later when my dad got the phone bill. I think that Judy and her parents in San Diego could probably hear the commotion. But my dad, he was a good guy. He was a little verbal sometimes, but he was not a violent man, which is really good for my brother's sake. But immediately, my brother was prohibited from basically even looking at the telephone. In fact, I think for a little while at night, my dad would unplug the handset and take it with him just to make sure. And that was going to be how it was until that phone bill was paid off. And I kind of understood, now I understand where my dad was coming from. I don't remember for sure, but I think the phone bill, because I heard this all going on, was like maybe $130. But you have to understand that I've since learned at this time, my dad never made much money. And by comparison, the mortgage on our 3-bedroom house was $150 a month. That was a lot of money. But it was a whole bunch more money to a high school kid who was working 10 hours a week after school, earning like $2.25 an hour. And so it was going to take him a long time to pay it off, and writing letters to his girlfriend apparently wasn't cutting it. And I had an allowance by that time, a whole $2 a week. And he comes to me, and it's like Tuesday or Wednesday. I got my allowance on Saturday. And he's like, "Bob, do you have any money?" And I had 4 quarters, and I was not down for sharing, but I did let it slip that I had 4 quarters. My brother went on to have a successful career as a salesman. So he pitches this to me. He's like, "Bob, if you give me those 4 quarters, I just have to call Judy. On Friday, I'm going to get paid, and I promise I will pay you back, and I will give you $1.50. I actually studied accounting, and even at 10, that's about 7,000% annual interest. A 3-day loan at 50% interest is a good investment, and besides that, I figured I had security, because if he didn't pay, my mom and dad would make him pay, and he'd be in trouble. And in fact, without being prompted, on Friday, I got $1.50. Well, Saturday, I get my $2 allowance, so I have money. But I realize how much he owes my dad, and so those 6 quarters I just pushed to the side, and on Tuesday or Wednesday, they got borrowed again. I was also smart enough to understand the value of compounding interest. I didn't understand the term usury, but the thing was I didn't set the interest rate, he did. And so this continued for quite some time, and he didn't always borrow it, but it lasted for quite a while until he paid my dad off. But when he got close to paying my dad off, my dad was no longer his primary creditor. He owed me. And so once my dad was paid off, he realized that he was paying me a lot and payphones were expensive. And so he came to me with another business proposal. He agreed to give me his entire stamp collection if I forgave the debt. And so I ended up with a huge stamp collection. I had stamps from virtually every country in the whole world. And I was good with that. And my brother kept that relationship going. I don't think he ever fell asleep on the telephone again. But eventually, they were 14 and 15. It did not work out, not surprisingly. But this story also has a postscript. After children on both sides and marriages, in their mid-40s, Judy and my brother got back together. And at age 46, my nephew Connor was born. He's a miracle baby. And he turned out to be a bigger miracle when my sister-in-law Judy passed away. But my brother turned out to be a good dad too. And Connor is now in his late teens. And a while back, I'm at their house, and the insurance bill comes in, and my brother opens it, and it reflects an adjustment in rate because of some tickets that the youngest driver on the policy, my nephew Connor, got. And after the loud noise stopped, I was dead certain that I could hear my dad laughing his head off.
Thank you, Bob. We've got one more story tonight. Before we get to the last story, I want to mention next month we have another one of these. So, of course, you're going to want to be here. It's July 26th, Friday, unsurprisingly, 7 o'clock, same place. And our themes are brush with the law and or what the hell am I doing? Which could be the same thing or could be 2 different stories. Anyway, if you want to tell a story, go to BurienCultureHub.com/7stories, and there's a sign-up form there. BurienCultureHub.org, /7stories, and sign up. And then you'll get on the list, and then we'll send you an email saying, yeah, we're ready for you. Our last story tonight is from Mike Lockhart, who is an engineer who has been lucky enough to go to the UW, work for both Boeing and Microsoft. I guess Starbucks is the only one left. You still have time. Raise a family near Burien in Newcastle, and Mike says, when a friend told me that I should tell my usually silly stories at the Moth, I fell in love with the organization and storytelling. The rest has been history that has led me on a journey of storytelling all over Seattle for the last 8 years or so. But of course, my favorite place is 7 Stories. He didn't say that part, but I'll just say it. My favorite place to tell stories is 7 Stories. So Mike, come on up.
I have been very confused on the theme all night, and I realized the theme of my story is on next month's theme. I read wrong on the site. Sorry about that. So it's not about my dad. Anyway, this is such a nice thing that's done here down south here, so I really enjoyed it. But I have to tell you, I do love cereal. My wife and daughter and I just had a talking about mace, and they decided I needed mace, not them. I've always wanted a sister, an older sister. I only have a brother, and I really wanted an older, meaner sister. I thought that would be interesting, right? I know exactly the Logan Run thing you were talking about. We were laughing about it because I was like, oh my God, I know exactly the scene. I know exactly what you're talking about from Logan's Run. Anyway, and then when you were, and finally I said, why are there so many stories about fathers? That wasn't the theme. Well, you were telling the last one. I went, wait a minute, I'm not even on. Sorry, okay. All right. So we're doing something different here because I already had this story all figured out. Anyway, so when my parents told me that I was going to be an engineer, I said to them, "Oh, okay." And when they told me you're going to the University of Washington, I went, "Oh, okay." And when they told me you're going to take a summer job at the local nuclear power plant, I said, "Oh, okay." So when I finally got to go to the UW, I was sort of this nerdy kid. And no matter what organization I joined at the UW, I was never asked to be like social chairman or president. I was always asked to be scholarship chairman or something like that, right? Which I was like, I just said, oh okay. I just did that. And, but as I got to my junior year, 40 years ago at the UW, this spring quarter, I looked around at all my engineering brethren. And in that engineering brethren, there was a certain set of them. They were getting very good grades, but they also partied a lot and did a lot of drugs and seemed to have a lot of sex. and I thought, what is wrong with me? And I said, that's when I decided the perfect person, I want to be that person. I don't want to be me. So I want to be this person who is an electrical engineer living the life of sex, drugs, and rock and roll at the same time. So I planned my quarter, 40 years ago, this quarter, I decided I was going to live like that. So I sat down and I had a plan. I figured out if I took 3 classes at the UW and failed them all, I figured out what my grade point average would be. And I said, I would still get my engineering degree. So I said, I'm going to spend the quarter for 10 weeks being sex, drugs, rock and roll electrical engineer. Now, there were some friends that in this engineering group from friends and friends of friends, and they lived off campus at this house. They had an off-campus house, and they had a basement that was nicknamed the Dungeon. And I always wanted to be part of the Dungeon. So I planned this quarter. I had a few rules, and I befriended the Dungeon people, and I got myself invited to it, starting the beginning of spring quarter 40 years ago. I planned 3 perfect classes, right? The first class I took was Music 331 at the UW. It's history of jazz. Because I figured being stoned and hungover, I would get a better grade. And I had friends who had all the tests. The professor gave always the same tests over and over. So I kind of felt like, yeah, okay, I could do that. The second class I took was French 103, right? Because I'd had 4 years of French in high school. The UW didn't know that. So I figured, okay, I can just sort of futz my way through French 103. And the last, I had to take one real electrical engineering class. It is a core engineering class for electrical engineers. The title of the class is Fourier Transforms. Okay, no, I'm gonna ask you all a question. How many of you don't know, raise your hand if you don't know what a Fourier transform is? So the quarter begins, and I have nights at the dungeon drinking, and I'm smoking pot. I'm invited a lot because I was sort of a virginal pot smoker. So they invited me every night because I was the comedy for them. And I would go to class. I just got up and went to class, but I told myself, I'm not gonna drop a class, I'm not doing any homework, and I don't care about the tests. I decided I can do this, right? It was kind of a less risky thing. I had figured out the grade point average. I said, okay, I'm gonna do this. So, so the quarter goes on, and the beginning of the quarter is awesome, right? Drinking, smoking. The sex was, I thought would happen automatically, but it didn't. I thought it just came. I watched these other guys, it just seemed to happen automatically. For me, that there was still a wall there somehow. We get to the middle of the quarter, and each of these classes only had one midterm, homework, and a final. So the homework was not doing that. Get to the midterms. I kind of futzed through French, right? Fourier, if you don't know, is a French engineer, so there was sort of a connection there that I knew. So at least I knew that. And I took the history of music. I could sort of pass the test. Even though I had the answers, I still managed to get like a C on that midterm. Because anyway. and then comes the midterm for Fourier transforms. It was the night, I know exactly, it was on May 18th, 1984, 40 years ago. Because on the 17th was the day I turned 21, and I was supposed to have a 21 run. I kind of got really nervous, right? I said, oh God, I'm gonna go be me. So I decided I would actually kind of sit down and look at the homework that I hadn't done and try and do something. But this horrible, evil friend of mine came up, Mike, you only turned 21 runs. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, we're gonna do that. And then he said 3 horrible words to me. Just one drink. And the next day, after visiting the dungeon, I promptly woke up the next day at 10:05 for my 10 a.m. Fourier transform midterm. I decided to go. I just walked to this building across campus, went into the midterm session where there was one female student there who I had an eye on that. The sex thing should have happened with her. But I knew it was bad when I walked up to her and I grabbed my test, smelling of pot and still drunk. Walked up to her, and as she's already started the test. I am just walking up there, and she goes like this. She's doing the test, she looks up. I smelled bad, I looked bad. I got 10% on that test. I've never had a 10% in my life, not even in kindergarten. And that 10% was only because of partial credit. There were 5 true, I still have the test. I saved this test. There were 5 true-false questions. I got them all wrong, all 5 of them. Now, I want you to know that I mathematically can do that. That's 1 in 32 that's gonna happen, I want you to know. So you've all learned something. That's what I got out of Fourier transforms. 10%. I got worried. I thought maybe I should drop the class. I was a little scared, and I said to myself, nope, I had a plan, and it was low risk. I'm still gonna graduate. So I went into the finals, and sure enough, I got an F in Fourier transform. Wish there'd been a true-false question. was Fourier French? I would have gotten that one question right, probably. It was a complete disaster. And worst of all, I had the best 10 weeks, but by the end, I was so nervous and stressed out over not being me that I decided I'd better go back and be me after the quarter. It was so stressful to get an F in Fourier transforms. So that essentially I had, why would I even think that was a good idea? I don't know what came over me to think, but the good thing is, the other thing about this month is that last week was my mom's birthday, and she would have been 86 this week, right, or last week. And what was nice about that, I thought about this whole event of being not me for 10 weeks and just taking the punishment of whatever it meant. And then my mom, she always had this one phrase she said to me, and so the story and this came together. She just always told me, whether I was working at the nuclear power plant or not telling them I'd failed Fourier transforms, but she always just said to me, and I can just see her telling it to me now, she just says, Mike, just be yourself. I know, and that's what I got out of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. So again, huge thanks to the Highline Heritage Museum for having us here. Thanks for coming tonight. If you didn't get a chance on your way in to give a donation, Peggy's got the donation jar. So feel free to drop something in there on your way out. And we look forward to seeing you next month. You had something else?
Except, may I say
Yeah,
something?
please.
So we have a clipboard going around with asking for information from you to sign up with your email and whether or not you're interested in a storytelling workshop. And if that comes around to us, we will make sure that you are on our email mailing list. And I'd also like to let you know that Paul over here is going to be leading a storytelling workshop for us. Date to be determined, but probably in the next month or two.
Sounds good.
Okay, so if you really want to have the most amazing experience of honing your storytelling craft, consider signing up for that workshop, and if you're on our email list, you will find out about it. And once again, this has been a really great evening. I'm so excited about all the wonderful stories and all the wonderful people who are coming to share their lives and their stories and entertain us. And I hope to see you again soon. And don't forget, volunteer organization, the basket's over there. And I just hate doing that, but it's for the most worthy cause.
Thank you.